It's primary day in both Nebraska and West Virginia, and the top race of the day is a heavily contested Republican primary for governor of Nebraska. Joining us right now to talk about this, Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon. Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Bacon. First, I would imagine voters in Nebraska have the same concerns as all Americans for how they're going to weigh out this rising price war that we're seeing. I mean, inflation just at an all-time high. We heard you speak out about inflation, blaming it on excess spending this week. So what is the right way in your mind to correct course?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. And I have to laugh when you hear the President Biden plan. We have 8.5% inflation today, 41%, or it's the highest in 41 years, excuse me. And it's because of more spending, this tax and spend policies he had. March of last year, he spent $2 trillion with no offsets. It added 10% to the liquidity into our monetary system, which has the effect of devaluing our currency by about 10%. And so we have inflation at 8.5%. So his solutions are to do price controls, which do not work. That means you have less of whatever you put a price control on. And he wants to spend more money, which will lead to more inflation. The right answer is to reduce spending and to reduce the deficit spending. And if you look back the last 2 years, we have spent way too much money. And this president has put up over $9 trillion in new spending when you look back over the last 15 to 16 months. So the best way to get solutions around inflation is to quit all this deficit spending.
It's
and
really
Nebraska. This is the number one issue in Nebraska.
It's the number one issue in Nebraska. I'm sure it's the number one issue among our viewers watching right now at home. And obviously, Nebraska leads the way in production of a number of crops, very important to agriculture in this country. How is inflation, along with the supply chain issues, impacting farmers in your state?
Well, when you hear from farmers, input costs for like fertilizers and various like phosphates and things that you put in before you plant are between 200 and 300% more than they were last year. That is a tremendous burden on our farmers when you're paying 200% to 300% more for that. So the costs just to get a crop have gone way up. And part of this is tied back to our energy policy, which is also largely the fault of this administration. During the campaign, the Biden team basically said they're going to declare war against the fossil fuels industry of America, and they did on day one. I mean, they cut leases, they cut permits, they cut the Keystone Pipeline, and basically we went from a net exporter of energy to a net importer of energy within 1 year. This has had an impact on our farmers too in the input costs, because a lot of the fertilizers that we use are tied to those same manufacturing processes and parts. So the president's policies have also contributed to this high inflation that our farmers are seeing.
I have to ask you a question, and this might come off as one that's very elementary, but are people who don't agree with President Biden, Republicans and then some moderate Democrats have actually spoken out against some of his policies, are the hands of those folks tied? Is it this waiting game? Or is there anything that can be done in a collaborative fashion between the White House and the current administration and lawmakers right now?
Well, the last year, the president and the Democrats passed some of this legislation on a party line vote. They used reconciliation so they could get past the filibuster in the Senate. I think, though, more and more moderate Democrats are standing up against it. So, for example, I have to compliment Senator Joe Manchin opposed the Build Back Better bill. That would have been $5 trillion in new spending, and we've added $3 trillion to the deficit. And that would have probably raised inflation, would probably double inflation with what we see today at 8.5%. So as long as more Democrats stand up against this reckless spending, I think that we'll have some positive impact on inflation. But it's going to take a year or two to get this inflation down, to recover from the damage of what this administration has done. Now, I'm of the belief that we take back the House in November and hopefully the Senate, that the president will have to come to the middle and work with Republicans and have a more moderate spending policy. After last January, when the president won the 2 Georgia seats, he didn't think he had to do that. He went far left. He took the Bernie Sanders policy, and he was able to use reconciliation on party line votes to drive through a bunch of his agenda. If we could take back the House and the Senate, I believe the president will have to come back in the middle, and we'll have a more moderate I think, fiscally sound policy coming from Washington.
Because I'm sure that there are a lot of Americans who are thinking, we can't wait. We can't afford to wait until the next election. We want some answers now. And so it would be wonderful to see Democrats and Republicans working together on some of these things so that we can at least get the ball rolling versus kicking the can down the road. Thank you so much, Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska, for joining us. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.